welcome to Property Quorum. Now, as most of you who know me know that on Fridays we tend to bang on about cladding and all the horrendous iniquities therein. But today we have a special guest, Steve Day, who's going to talk with the rest of the Property Quorum starlets, Hamish McClay of Search and Convey, Chris Gilsenan of Route Home, Juliet Baboolal of Gunner Cook, and of course Steve Day of the of his ongoing onslaught against the powers that be, who aren't recognising the evil of the cladding that they've left stuck on various buildings. Today's topic, however, is builders don't seem to want to fix it. I couldn't possibly understand what they're talking about, but instead I'm going to refer to my dear friend Hamish McClay.
We'll drop into history. Not that I remember that far back myself, but apparently this word went out of use in the English language for some strange reason. The word was integrous, and I think it's my find of the year. I believe it to be a superb word that could be used in an awful lot of places that we haven't been using it for the last 300 or 400 years. And what I have to actually sort of add to that is I did also believe personally that our builders were a very reputable bunch in early days. Now, the sad thing is, can we now use the word integrous with the word builder? I'm sure there are some integrous builders out there, but sadly, some of our builders have created an element of sort of distortion in terms of what is acceptability within the market. We have actually found, as we look further and further, that it's caused quite a damaging sort of impact on what's going on. Two aspects. First of all, one of them which raises its head enormously, which should never happen, is basically the integrity of new build properties and the number of complaints we hear about new build properties. But that is just a minor thing compared to what has actually been found. And it's only been found out because we had that disaster at Grenfell. Because until that time, people hadn't looked in significant depth. People were aware and mention was made of. However, the depth of investigation hadn't been quite the same. But warnings had been given, but nobody took any notice of the warnings until Grenfell. Now, it appears to me that very little has been taken into account to actually really sort something out very, very quickly. And I think as a consequence, we've got an impact right the way across the whole of the building industry, looking into sort of quality. And I think it's causing challenges in many areas, particularly in not assisting the quality, the quantity, never mind the quality of housing stock that we have available on the market.
Well, Juliet, may I come to you? What is the knock-on effect of the inequality and the disquiet that's been caused by Grenfell and the report that followed from a legal standpoint?
Well, so now you've got all of these cladding issues and you've got properties that are potentially unmortgageable. And so that's the aftermath of it. But, the topic that we've got here, builders don't seem to want to fix it. The question is, are the builders the one to fix it? If you've got a system that's broken where there are no checks and balances and builders are allowed to do what they want, clearly they're going to do as they please because there is no sort of boundary to them. So unless someone steps in and says, well, actually, builder, you're not allowed to double the ground rent, you're not allowed to do this, or you are required to put certain measures in place to ensure that a building is safe. Why would the builder want to fix anything? They've just been going along historically with the flow. Because we've got Grenfell, there is now this issue that's awoken. But it's not for the builders to fix. The system, the construction industry is broken and it needs to be reviewed with a fine-tooth comb by people who actually understand the ramifications of it. You know, if I look at a warranty, which is a 10-year warranty, and I've got a purchaser, an owner of a property coming to me as a builder outside of that 10-year period saying, look, you've got to fix this and this. And there are cheeky purchasers or borrowers on the other side who would do that. So builders, on the one hand, need to protect themselves. But on the other hand, you know, there needs to be a standard that is required of them. And that's not there. But it's not for builders to fix it. The system is broken and it needs to be reviewed. And unless there's checks and balances, people will continue to take advantage of the system.
Chris, can I have your reaction to this, please? I mean, we all know that in a world where businesses are only responsible to their shareholders, as most of these larger builders are, and the shareholders just want more throughput and more streamlining, and there's no controls or checks and balances at the end where they build the stuff, you end up in chaos, really.
It feels like the older I get, the more you zoom out and look at it from a macro level, it seems like accountability has just been thrown out of the window. And I'd say in many instances it's a small minority. For example, in my industry, we have all sorts of licensing schemes that the councils love to create, and they bandy around terms like, well, we're going to put a licensing scheme in place to prevent rogue landlords. Well, the rogue landlord is not going to apply for a license, so how is that going to deter the rogue landlord? If you're going to have bad behavior from people, they're going to act in a bad way, irrespective of the rules. Now, there's plenty of legislation, there's plenty of regulation that's already available to many different oversight organizations, but the application of that is not necessarily being done in a way that keeps people accountable and holds disreputable characters to account. So I think that there are some challenges. I think, as Juliet mentioned, the system is broken, in that the right people to be holding people to account and not doing what they should be doing to hold these disreputable individuals and organizations to account, and which results in people like the organizations that maybe the contractors or whoever who are building these properties and cutting corners, not using the right fire breaks on the types of product that they're putting on the outside of the building. For example, I mean, I'm sure Steve will go into more detail on that. But yeah, that's just one microcosm of, from a macro level, it seems to be prevalent in our society, and quite frankly, it's frustrating.
But I, from my perception, and maybe I've got this wrong, Chris, it's not simply just on buildings with cladding. There seems to be a quality issue that seems to be prevalent among modern large-scale builders.
Yeah, it's endemic. Yeah, I think so.
Right.
And it's down to many. Part of it's down to cost, and then part of it is down to they think they can get away with that.
Steve, welcome, by the way. And there's a reason why our Cladding Matters has the theme tune that goes "Big Bad Builders."
Yeah, yes, it does. So, I mean, you're hit the nail on the head. So it isn't just a cladding problem. 432 million pounds of non-cladding defects at the Olympic Village prove that. And what we're seeing as residents is a big watering down of the remediation standards. So there's a standard called PAS 9980, which the post-Grenfell remediations comply to, which basically waters down compliance. So it doesn't need the building to require building regulation compliance at the time of construction to be met. And as we're seeing in my development of Royal Artillery Quays, the fire brigade has condemned one of the 8 fire shafts as not meeting regulations at the time of construction, and are refusing to issue the same notice on the other 7 towers, even though they all are missing the fire doors at the base of each shaft, which is against the ADB regulations of 2000 when the buildings were built. So as an example, PAS ignores all of that illegal construction. And says, oh, well, it doesn't matter. You can leave the combustible panels on, and crucially, without any fire performance test evidence. So they want to put Euro Class E, which is highly combustible panels, leave them on, all of our fire shafts right up the 16 stories on fire shafts that are illegally constructed, which PAS conveniently ignores, and then ignores the fact that they've got no idea what the product of these combustible Euro Class E panels are, and they don't know the fire performance of leaving it on, and then claim to be following a risk-based approach. Well, who's going to take the risk? It's the insurers, and they're enjoying the situation at Royal Artillery Quays, so much so that our service charge is now £6,800. So give you a little taste of just why we have a two-tier system. So you're passing the risk of the remediation cost, which sounds all very nice when the government are doing the accelerated remediation plan. Well, they're accelerating a watered down standard, which is pushing the risk back onto the consumer, and then ultimately they're paying it in insurance costs. And this is unacceptable. And one of the arguments that me and the Earl have heard at the House of Lords many times is that, well, you can't revise PAS 9980, it will invalidate all the contracts. Well, actually, the developer contract doesn't actually refer to a specific version of PAS 9980. So if you revise PAS, it would upgrade the remediations for the contracts. And incidentally, it's being revised right now. The BIS are going to be publishing for public consultation in a few more months' time a 6-week consultation on the new standard, which my fear is will be watered down even further to confirm that you don't need to know the test evidence to leave the stuff on the building. So that's my worry. And ultimately, we're saying that because the industry has got endemic issues, Taylor Wimpey has got a 77% life endangering defect rate using the developer contract data, 35% for the new master builder Barratt, and I can list a load more which are in between the range. So these are life endangering defects so bad that they put your life in safety critical danger. That's the definition in the developer contract, life critical defects. So if that's where we are, we need a new solution, and that's what we'll be bringing to the House of Lords as amendments to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill imminently. So it's a statutory scheme, which means you don't have to go through the courts. It offers consumer protection for buildings. I think the Building Safety Act is consumer protection for builders, but that's by the by.
I see what you did there. Yeah.
But no, so this scheme will basically allow leaseholders, flat owners to basically get these defects, cladding and non-cladding, structural and fire safety, remediated without going through the courts. And the developer, if they use a temporary company, their parent company will pay, so it handles parent company liability using the same law that we use in Germany. Which doesn't affect investor confidence with the sort of very small scoped piercing of the corporate veil, which we think in this situation is acceptable in ECHR. We got an ECHR sign off from two eminent silks, and of course Daniel Greenberg, the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner, did draft the legislation, and we'll be putting that to a vote in the Lords when we get back to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. But we also want a few other things, and I've been meeting with Kevin Hollinrake, the Shadow Housing Secretary, to try and push these in the Commons. One is to reform PAS to ban combustibles off buildings above 80 metres. So that will speed up the remediations of the building safety regulator that we've seen, delaying everything, simplifies compensation, brings it in line with current law. And two, make sure that all leaseholders are protected, and we've got a funding mechanism to do that. Outside of the Treasury, so we don't get blocked on any public spending.
Hamish, it seems to be that at the moment, until this comes through, and it's I mean all power to Steve and the team, but it's dragging on. I mean, it's been how many years since Grenfell, and still we have not got the vast majority of places with this horrendous cladding nonsense on it remediated. Because it just can't agree, and there just don't appear to be any real teeth to any of this.
I think this is the sadness about it, and as Juliet sort of, there are people who can make decisions and could actually impose, if you like, conditions upon people to ensure that the standards were met. And we've actually sort of been through this. The councils are in a very, very strong position to be able to just sort of impose sanctions and all sorts on builders. So too with the government. And sadly, what we see with the government, they actually promote people, and they actually promote a master builder like Barratt's, knowing the defects within not just the new build properties, but particularly what's going on in Royal Artillery.
I mean, as I understand it, Hamish, what was it? 1 in 3 properties built by Barratt's is basically uninhabitable.
Oh,
Have I got that wrong?
That's flats under the developer contract. Let's just be clear. So
yeah,
just so we're accurate,
but there's a lot of flats. That means there's tons of flats out there that can't be used.
Absolutely. I think this is really what we're trying to sort of speak about here. Yeah. It has an impact right the way across the whole building sector, because it's taken out the number of properties. There's no way we could go into the depth. There's no way we could bring in the people who have knowledge onto a short feature like this. But what we want is just a matter of sort of saying, look, this is so impactful throughout the whole of what's going on in building. The number of properties that are available at this particular moment in time are reduced significantly because people have, if you like, they are confused about how safe is the cladding. And Steve actually explained there, when somebody's moving, and I do feel for somebody like Juliet, who of course is trying to she's looking at the risk, or her profession, they are looking at the risk of an individual moving into a property. And you need to, are we actually starting to look now, well, this builder's got a 78% chance of having failed, this one's got 33, this one's only got 52. Do we actually start looking at the quality of the builder's construction of these particular sort of types of flats to make a decision, should we be able to move in there? But it is reducing the number of available properties. And without, as Juliet explained there, without any control being imposed upon new builds, this will continue. This will be a continuous process, and it brings us back to that word integrity. Until integrity is brought into the build program and somebody decides that they're going to take responsibility for it, nobody's actually taking responsibility for it at the moment, sadly.
Juliet, it must be so frustrating knowing that there's tons of potential properties out there for first-time buyers, but there's no way they can get onto the ladder because they're unavailable, frankly.
It's frustrating, and it's quite sad that we, that word integrity, it's lacking. You hit the nail on the head, Hamish, where we've got such a calculative structure where, I'm a builder, I'm building a property and it's not fit for purpose, and I'm happily going to sell it on. Chris mentioned the word accountability. Accountability is essential, not just for the builders, but for the decision makers. Steve mentioned those statistics. Those are staggering statistics. They are very, very worrying. And, the other thing about this new bill, in terms of not having to go through the court system and get it done a lot quicker, that is essential, because often what puts off an individual is the level of costs and time it takes to go through the courts to rectify stuff. So if there are measures in place where we know, for example, builders are going to be accountable and it's going to be a lot easier to pursue claims or to pursue issues, then that's a start in the right direction. But we've got a long way to go.
I'm going to just, Chris, do you think that if we give these schemes more teeth, there is a likelihood that these so-called master builders will come to heel?
I think there's a reluctance to go after these organisations. I think there's endemic corruption across the board. So I think that's the bit that needs to change, that we need to change our headspace and get into the idea of actually holding people accountable. But yeah, I think there's too much endemic corruption that's going on between these corporations and potentially even government offices.
And also the fire brigade, we've found that the fire brigade are very reluctant when the evidence is staggering, and they've even condemned one building. They don't want to condemn the other 7, which have got exactly the same defects, because there's obviously a cost element for Barratt. If you're going to have to rebuild part of one fire shaft going up 16 stories, do you really want to make Barratt do the other 7? And so I'm finding a reluctance in the London Fire Brigade now to actually issue the other 7. And then the council, they will not chase for a reform of PAS 9980, even though they're chased for other things like bring the insurance down, blaming the insurers, when it's actually they're leaving a load of untestable combustibles that are banned on new buildings on existing. So there is a massive pushback to our campaign, which on the face of it should be supported because of Grenfell and because of safety. And everyone wants to pay lip service to it. But when I actually say, well, actually, there's some simple things you could do, they're completely against everything I'm doing. And I've, had a lot of sort of personal attack, on various things just because I'm campaigning for safety. So I think you're right, Chris. There's a massive reluctance to actually solve the Grenfell problem, and a caveat emptor attitude that actually it all comes down to the homeowner. We need to ultimately spread the risk, and the big warning for everyone is if one development, I know it's a big one, but if Olympic Village can basically have 432 million pounds worth of, then there's potentially other minefields out there that when the cladding comes off, when the internals are looked at, that you get another one, and then all of a sudden our 5 billion of public money's gone, and the very, very controlled levies, which are minimal, won't cover it, and we're going to be left with a choice: leaseholder loans forced against them, or the building safety scheme, which is our work, where we actually try and get the polluters where we can, get them to pay in full, and then spread the risk on the construction industry where we can't. It's going to come down to that choice, because I believe this will become a hugely expensive problem when we're in a phony war at the moment. A lot of these buildings haven't properly been worked on yet. Wait for the cladding to come off, and then we need an elastic backstop, which is either leaseholders paying with loans forced upon them, or the L scheme. It will be a binary choice, I think.
I don't know about an elastic backstop. I think we might need a ton of elastic bands just to hold things together when you take the cladding off. Anyway, Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Well, I must sort of thank everybody, because I did feel it was something, whilst we do speak about it on Fridays very, very often, we don't actually bring other parties from different aspects of the industry, if you like, together to actually sort of get their sort of views too. And it is an important one. So I greatly appreciate everybody's input today. And today is the day of, it's Maundy Thursday today. It's one of those days when we sort of think, and what used to be I remember it when I was young, not going back to the 17th century or 16th century, but when the Queen was alive, how she always used to be giving out money to the poor on a third. She would be looking after those. So maybe it's a day that perhaps the builders could start by having a little think about giving back to the people that they've made the money from, to see that they're in a safe place.
Wow. I don't know how you managed to rescue a chink of light out of that gloom, but well done there, Hamish. It only remains for me to say thank you to our stalwarts. That's Juliet Baboolal of Gunner Cook, Chris Gilsenan of Root Home, and Hamish McClare of Search Command. Of course, our special guest, Steve Day of the Building Safety Scheme.org. Do please visit there to find out more. Until next time, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, look after that mental health, and let's hold those builders to account. I wish you all very well. Take care. Bye-bye.